When the Sasanian Empire falls in the 7th century, it can look again like a definitive ending. The last great pre-Islamic Iranian state collapses under the pressure of Arab Muslim armies. The political structure disappears, the ruling elite is displaced, Zoroastrianism, once tied closely to kingship, loses its position at the centre of power. If we were following a simple imperial narrative, this would be the point where Iran fades into the background. But that isn't what happens. Instead, something more complicated and in a lot of ways more influential begins. Because Iran doesn't vanish into the Islamic world, it actually reshapes it. And to understand how, we need to separate two things that are often treated as the same: political control and cultural influence. Now, after the conquest, political authority lies with Islamic caliphates, first the Umayyads and then the Abbasids. Arabic becomes the primary language of administration and religion. The new ruling elite is, at least initially, centered outside of Iran. But beneath that political layer, older structures and habits persist. Administrators who served under the Sasanians continue to work within the new system. Methods of taxation, record keeping, and governance are adapted rather than discarded. Court practices evolve, but they don't start from nothing. And gradually something else begins to happen. Persian returns, not as the language of a pre-Islamic past, but as a living medium within this new Islamic framework. It isn't the same Persian as before. It's written in the Arabic script, enriched with Arabic vocabulary, but it's still recognizably continuous with earlier forms of the language. By around the 9th and 10th centuries, this new Persian begins to appear in written form, and it spreads, not just inside Iran, but far beyond it. This is the beginning of what scholars call the Persianate world. It's not a single empire or even a single political system. It's like a shared cultural sphere linked by language, by literary forms, court practices, and by ideas about refinement and authority. You can see this process clearly under the Abbasid Caliphate. Although the Abbasids rule from Baghdad, many of their administrators, their scholars and intellectuals come from Iranian backgrounds. The Barmakid family is one well-known example. Originally from Balkh, they become powerful figures at the Abbasid court, help to shape administrative and cultural life. And more broadly, the Abbasid period sees a remarkable translation movement. Texts from Greek, Sanskrit and other traditions are translated into Arabic, and many of the scholars involved in this process are actually working within intellectual environments shaped by earlier Iranian traditions of learning. So it's not a simple transfer or translation, it's actually another layering. Islamic, Greek and Iranian elements combine in ways that produce something new. At the same time, regional dynasties begin to emerge within the Islamic world. Some of them are explicitly Iranian in origin. The Samanids, for example, rule in parts of Central Asia and northeastern Iran in the 9th and 10th centuries. They play a role in promoting Persian as a language of literature and administration. And it's under their patronage that one of the most important works in Persian literature is produced, the Shahnameh. Composed by Ferdowsi around the year 1000, the Shahnameh is an epic history of Iran, stretching from mythological beginnings to the fall of the Sasanian Empire. This is written centuries after the Islamic conquest, but it preserves, reworks, and reimagines pre-Islamic Iranian history in a form compatible with the new cultural environment. It doesn't reject Islam, but it does ensure that the memory of Iran before Islam isn't lost. So again, it's a pattern we see repeatedly. Continuity through transformation. Rather than resisting the new order outright, Iranian culture adapts to it, and in doing so, reshapes it from within. Persian becomes a language of high culture, not only for poetry, but for administration, for diplomacy and historiography. Courts across a vast region begin to adopt it. In Central Asia, in the Iranian plateau, in parts of the Indian subcontinent, even in Anatolia under the Seljuks and later the Ottomans, Persian literary forms and courtly ideals carry significant prestige. This spread isn't reinforced through a single imperial centre, it happens through networks. Scholars travel, poets seek patronage in different courts, administrators move between regions, manuscripts circulate, and wherever Persian goes, it brings with it a set of expectations about how a ruler should present themselves, about how history should be written, about what counts as refinement. Court culture, in particular, becomes a key site of this influence. Rulers commission poetry that praises their reign, but also situates them within a broader tradition of kingship. That tradition draws heavily on early Iranian models. The idea of the just ruler, the importance of maintaining order, the association between political authority and moral responsibility. Those themes, which we saw emerging in Zoroastrian thought and Achaemenid ideology, don't disappear. They're reframed, integrated into an Islamic context, but still recognizably connected to earlier patterns. At the same time, Persian literature develops in new directions. Poetry becomes one of the most important forms of expression, not just for courtly praise, but for philosophy, ethics, and spirituality. Figures like Rumi, Hafez, Sa'di, Omar Khayyam write in Persian, and their works circulate far beyond Iran itself. Rumi, for instance, writes in the 13th century in a region that is now part of Turkey. His poetry is deeply influenced by Sufi thought, an inward, experimental form of Islamic spirituality. But the language he uses, the metaphors he develops, the rhythms of the expressions are all part of a Persian literary tradition. This is another key element of the Persianate world. It isn't confined by political borders, it extends well beyond them. Sufism in particular plays an important role in this expansion. Sufi networks connect different regions through shared practices, teachings, and lineages, and they often operate somewhat independently of the formal political structures. And Persian becomes one of the main languages through which Sufi ideas are expressed and transmitted. That gives Persian an additional dimension. It isn't only a language of courts and administration, it's also the language of inner life, of reflection, of longing, of searching for meaning. By this point, we're looking at a cultural sphere that stretches from Anatolia in the west to northern India in the east. Within this sphere, political power is fragmented. Different dynasties rise and fall, territories are contested. But across all of it, there is this shared cultural vocabulary. A Persian-speaking bureaucrat can move from one court to another and find similar structures. A poet can still travel and still be understood. A set of texts, stories, and ideals circulates widely enough to create a sense of connection across distance. And this is what makes the Persianate world distinctive. It isn't unified by a single state, it's unified by culture. And culture is flexible, it adapts to local conditions. In India, under the Delhi Sultanate and later the Mughal Empire, Persian becomes the language of administration and high culture, but it interacts with local traditions, producing new forms of expression. In Anatolia, Persian literary models influence Ottoman court culture, even as Turkish becomes increasingly prominent. In Central Asia, Persian remains deeply embedded in intellectual and artistic life. This adaptability is part of its strength. It allows Persian culture to spread without requiring uniformity. It can be adopted, modified, and reinterpreted in different settings. And through all of this, something important happens to the idea of Iran. Politically, it's no longer the center of a vast empire, but culturally it becomes something broader. Iran is no longer just a place, it's a source, it's a reservoir of language, imagery, and ideas that shape a much larger world. That doesn't mean Iran itself is static. Within the Iranian plateau, local dynasties continue to rise and fall. Cities grow, decline, and are rebuilt. New influences enter, most dramatically with the Mongol invasions in the 13th century. These invasions are destructive, but they also become part of the same pattern we've seen before: conquest followed by adaptation. Mongol rulers eventually adopt Persian administrative practices. They patronize Persian scholars and artists. They become participants in the very culture they initially disrupted. By the end of this period, Persianate culture is firmly established across a wide region. It's survived political fragmentation, external conquest, and internal transformation. And it's done so not by remaining unchanged, but by remaining adaptable. But there's still something missing. For all its cultural influence, Iran itself isn't yet reconstituted as a clearly defined political and religious entity in the way it had been under the Sasanians. All that will change in the next episode, because in the early modern period, a new dynasty will emerge in Iran, one that will do something unusual. It will take this broad, flexible, trans-regional culture and anchor it within a more sharply defined state. It will tie political authority to a specific religious identity. And in doing so, it will create something that begins to look much more like the Iran we recognize today, the Safavids. Join me for that, but for now, have a great day.